Welcome back, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's complete lecture explainer, which is 68 Anglophone Culture, Stereotypes, and Intercultural Teaching Awareness. Today, we are going to completely deconstruct the complex realities of the Anglo-Saxon world. We'll be unpacking all those persistent myths and daily customs that define British and American cultures, and we're looking at it all through the lens of intercultural teaching. Let's get right into it. Okay, so think about the classic cultural iceberg metaphor. When we think about pervasive British and American stereotypes, we are usually only looking at the very tip of that iceberg, right? We see the visible customs, maybe traditional dress or popular foods, but the vast, vast majority of cultural reality, those deeply held values, beliefs, and unwritten assumptions, well, that lies hidden deep beneath the surface. Our goal today is to dive into those hidden depths. So, here is our game plan. We'll start off by defining culture's hidden depths. Then we'll break down British identity, four nations, and contrast that with the American continental mindset. After that, we're going to weigh stereotypes versus cultural reality before finally wrapping up with some really actionable strategies for fostering intercultural competence. Let's start with Section 1, Defining Culture's Hidden Depths. We need to nail down exactly what we mean when we use the word culture. Notice how our understanding typically splits right down the middle. On one side, you have big C culture. This is the formal stuff, the history, the major institutions, the grand art. But on the flip side, you have the often invisible little c culture. This is the everyday behavior, the culturally influenced beliefs, and the quiet perceptions that actually govern social acceptability. If you really want to successfully interact in a host community, mastering this little c is literally make or break. We can actually break this down even further into three interrelated dimensions. First, we have products, think literature and art, then ideas, which covers your beliefs and values, and finally, behaviors, so customs and daily habits. Getting this framework straight right off the bat gives us a really solid theoretical foundation for everything we're about to analyze. Moving on to Section 2, British Identity, Four Nations. Let's see how this framework applies to the UK. I want to throw a question right out to you. Is Britain just England? No way. But, a lot of people incorrectly use the word England interchangeably with the entire United Kingdom. Let me tell you, this is a super frequent mistake, and honestly, it is not well received by the Scots, the Welsh, or the Irish. Yes, England is the largest and most populous part for sure, but it's really just one piece of a much larger, very complex puzzle. To truly understand the British mindset, we have to look at their geography. Britain is an island, and that island status, it has protected them from invasion for over 9 centuries. That kind of extreme geographic isolation has fundamentally shaped a traditional British mentality of, well, isolationism. It also fostered a unique environment where a stable constitutional monarchy could survive long-term, alongside this deeply ingrained pride and moderation and tolerance. And incredibly, they've sustained all of this without a written constitution for centuries. The absolute key takeaway here is that the UK is a single state, but it is made up of 4 distinct nations, and each one has a remarkably robust cultural identity. You've got Wales, with its strong Celtic heritage, preserved through a really serious modern revival of the Welsh language. Then, Scotland, which maintains completely distinct legal and educational systems. Northern Ireland is heavily shaped by a very complex religious and political history. And then, of course, there is England, acting as the heart of Britain. And it's not just borders. The physical landscape itself literally shapes their identity. It cements regional consciousness. Whether you're looking at a rugged Scottish landscape or isolated farms in Northern Ireland, the varied geography across the UK heavily influences those diverse behaviors and little c cultures we talked about earlier. All right, let's jump into Section 3, the American continental mindset. Let's shift our focus across the Atlantic. The United States is defined by its massive, sprawling territory. This unbelievable scale has actually created what some scholars refer to as cultural megalomania. Conquering a resource-rich, continent-sized territory essentially stamped a sense of massiveness right onto the American mentality. Bigness is a total point of pride there. Plus, because America is built on an immigrant foundation by people who completely uprooted themselves, there's an extremely high rate of geographic mobility. Compared to Europeans, Americans generally have a much weaker attachment to their birthplaces, and they'll readily move all the way across the continent just to chase a new opportunity. Now, because of this constant demographic expansion and shifting immigration, the way America views its own culture has actually evolved quite a bit.
Historically, the big idea was the melting pot, where all citizens were essentially expected to assimilate into one unified mainstream identity. But today, the modern approach is more like a salad bowl. This model actively celebrates diversity. It views the nation as a place where different groups can preserve their independent ethnic traditions within a larger multi-ethnic wholeness.
Which brings us to Section 4, Stereotypes versus Cultural Reality. So how do those factual cultural realities we just talked about actually hold up against the simplified narratives we see in mass media? Well, cultural scholars describe this as a kaleidoscope effect. On one hand, you have the reality layer, the factual events and actual practices of a culture. But superimposed right on top of that is the imagination layer. This is built from media discourses and persistent stereotypes. And more often than not, this imagined layer completely overshadows the complex, lived realities on the ground. Here is a perfect example of this disconnect. Think about the myth of the traditional British gentleman. The imagination layer immediately pictures a guy with a bowler hat and an umbrella, right? Just extreme formality. But the reality layer, that image is practically a relic. If you walk into the city of London today, you aren't going to see bowler hats. You're going to find a dynamic, highly multicultural workforce. The persistent media myth just totally fails to reflect reality. Okay, final part. Section 5, Fostering Intercultural Competence. So, how do we as educators and learners actually fix this disconnect? We can look to Ned Seeley's 4 Goals for Cultural Instruction. It's a great step-by-step framework. Step 1, we have to critically evaluate those stereotypes. Step 2, stimulate genuine intellectual curiosity about the target culture. Step 3, develop empathy. We have to learn to see the world from entirely different cultural perspectives. And finally, step 4, promote adaptability, so we're ready to navigate unfamiliar context with confidence. This means modern cultural instruction has to treat language as a social practice. It's not just about memorizing textbook grammar. The focus really needs to be on understanding foreignness and moving way past simplistic national labels. We have to avoid just prescribing static facts. Instead, by implementing authentic materials like real literature, news, and films, we can actually explore all the diverse, messy subcultures within any single nation. This really brings to mind a powerful warning from the author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie about the danger of a single story. Simplified cultural narratives create stereotypes that, they might not be completely untrue, but they are always incredibly incomplete. Developing critical media literacy is absolutely crucial, so we don't fall into the trap of just accepting a monolithic, single-story version of complex places like the UK or the US. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. Think about everything we've uncovered today. How does your own cultural imagination layers shape the way you view the world? Because before we can truly understand the hidden depths of someone else's culture, we really need to critically examine the biases and media discourses that are coloring our own perspectives. So keep questioning, keep learning, and whatever you do, don't just settle for the tip of the iceberg.